Hi everyone, this is Jenny Owens, and today I'm going to talk about informed consent. I have an informed consent form from an LPC in Austin, Texas. His name is John Howard. I chose his form because I like the way he worded things, and I like the way he communicates with his clients. I also chose his form because he is in Texas and I'm a resident of Texas. We're going to look at the state mandates for informed consent, as well as the ACA Code of Ethics. So as we look at his form, we can see that he meets the requirement of Texas to make the client aware of the fees and the arrangement of payment. He has a whole section on fees and how much things cost and how to make those payments. He also is very clear about the counseling purposes, goals, and techniques. John Howard has two sections in his form that I really liked. One is labeled the nature of therapy, and the other is how therapy works. And in those two sections, he goes through the different phases of counseling. He's very honest about challenges that the client may face. He also details his approach to counseling. He backs that up with research. He talks a lot about the therapeutic relationship, about the motivation of the client. He just really lays all those things out very well. Also, restrictions placed on the license by the board should be mentioned. There's no specific mention of those in his form. However, he does list the exemptions placed on confidentiality that are mandated by the state of Texas. That also goes with the next requirement, which are limits of confidentiality, and he has a whole section on confidentiality, and he lays out well what that means and how those restrictions apply. Following that, the intent of the licensee to use any other individuals to provide counseling treatments or interventions should be listed. John Howard does this several times in his form, most notably in the section on specialists and referrals. Supervision of the licensee by another licensed healthcare professional should be made known, but John Howard doesn't apparently have a supervisor. None is listed or mentioned in his form. Finally, in the state of Texas, the name, the address, and the phone number of the board should be given so that the client can report violations, but John Howard does not give any of this information or make it known to the client. Moving on to the ACA's Code of Ethics, we see in the guidelines for informed consent that they begin in A2A with the client's freedom to choose whether or not to enter in or remain in a counseling relationship. John Howard mentions this several times in his form. In section A2B, the nature of all services provided should be listed in informed consent. He not only explains things well in his form, but he lists services that he provides, services that his group provides, and also services that can be provided from other specialists outside of his practice. Now, there are some other things mentioned in that section. One thing in particular is who the client should go to in the case of the counselor's sudden death or incapacitation, and there's no information at all given in regards to this in his form. In section A2C, counselors are to use clear language and be culturally appropriate, and I've emphasized several times that he does use very clear language. I thought that this was a shining point of his form. He also has a section on multicultural awareness where he describes his desire and his aptitude for multicultural awareness. Section A2D is in reference to clients who are incapable of giving informed consent. This is talking about minors, incapacitated adults, and others who can't give voluntary consent. John does not address these types of clients verbatim, but he does mention that he will always include his clients in the decision-making process, except in rare cases where a client may be a danger to themselves and he needs to call 911. Lastly, in the Code of Ethics, we see that there should be an address to clients who are receiving mandated counseling, but there's no mention of mandated counseling at all in his form. While John Howard does leave out a few things in his form. I do want to note that he also adds some details. I found an article that was published by the ACA. It was written by Robert Walsh and Norman Dassenbrook. It's called Implementing Informed Consent, and they give some good details about implementing informed consent in their article. One of the things that they list is emergency contact. He has a whole section on emergencies where he instructs his clients to call 911, to call the mental health hotline where LPCs are available 24 hours a day to give crisis intervention. He also gives a number for additional community resources. Now, Walsh and Dassenbrook think he should have a signature line where the client signs and dates that they've received this information. And while he doesn't have that signature line, he does do a good job of giving this information. I really enjoyed this assignment. I learned a lot about informed consent and how to communicate these things with a client.